Okay, you should be good to go.
Okay, I will go ahead and start. Are we recording? Perfect. Okay, good morning, everybody. We are here today, June 3rd, 2025, at 9 a.m. here for the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board Partnerships and Capacity Committee meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the virtual meeting is being streamed live on OWEB's YouTube channel and recorded. And for those of you watching along, the materials are provided in the board and committee section of the OWEB website. Committee materials are towards the bottom of the page, and viewers can click on the relevant committee and have access to the current meeting materials as well as past recordings. We will take a minute to introduce ourselves, and before that, I'm actually going to kind of review the meeting agenda and then do introductions. So we've got space for welcome and introductions. We'll move into public comment. We'll review the OWEB operating capacity grant staff recommendations that I suspect we'll be seeing at the full board committee meeting coming, or the full board meeting coming up. We will have an update on the FIP ecological priorities, and then we'll do a wrap up and future topics. So with that, I will move us into introductions, and let's start with OWEB board committee members. So I'm going to look around the room here. I'll turn it over to my co-chair Woody first. Oh, you're on mute, Woody.
I put it on mute instead of take it off. Woody Wolf, representing Oregon Water Resources Department and co-chair of the Partnership and Capacity Committee.
Awesome. Liz, please.
Good morning from sunny Southwest Oregon. And Liz Agpawa, board member and a liaison from the Oregon Board of Forestry.
Good morning. Erin, please. Oh.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Erin Curtis, and I am the representative from the Bureau of Land Management.
Thank you. Jamie, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Jamie McLeod-Skinner. I'm on the OWEB board and just listening into this meeting, and apologies for being off screen. I've got a bunch of stuff going on in the background.
Okay, great. We'll move to staff next. So, Sarah.
Hey, everybody. Sarah O'Brien, OWEB's executive director here in sunny Northwest Oregon. It's so sunny, it's even sunny here.
Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. Nicole Bettinardi, OWEB's exec assistant and board liaison.
Eric W.
Good morning, everyone. Eric Williams, OWEB's restoration grants manager.
And Eric H.
Hey, good morning, folks. Eric Hartstein, OWEB's policy coordinator.
Brian.
Good morning, everybody. Brian Wolcott, grants coordinator for water acquisitions and capacity.
Courtney, and then Denise, please.
Good morning, Courtney Schaff, OWEB's monitoring and reporting program manager.
Good morning, Denise Hoffert, Partnerships Coordinator, and I support our partners around the state in the Focused Investment Partnerships Program.
And I see we have two guests with us today, Neil and then Roy, please.
Neil Schulman from the North Clackamas Watersheds Council, just interested in both, obviously the future of capacity funding and also the part of the Clackamas Focused Investment Partnership. So just mostly listening.
And then Roy, if you can hear us. Okay.
Oh, hello. Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
Oh, hey, hello. My name is Roy UI. I'm with the Sandy River Watershed Council board member. Apologies, I'm on my phone. I'm on vacation. I'm not sure how to do the Zoom controls here very well.
Awesome. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Is there anyone I missed? Looks like we got everybody. Okay, great. So next on the agenda is public comment, and I believe we have not received any written public comment. Is that correct? Okay. And then do we have anybody signed up to give verbal comment this morning?
So at that point, we can ask, I guess, either Roy or Neil, if you guys are interested in participating in public comment now, you can raise your Zoom hand and we can call on you.
And Roy, if you don't know how to raise your Zoom hand, you can just come off mute.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would like to make a brief comment. Thank you.
Sure. Well, you can go ahead and do that now.
Oh, well, thank you, everyone. My name is Roy UI again, the board chair, co-chair of the Sandy River Watershed Council. On the capacity grant, I'd like to make a comment. I understand that the criteria for the merit portion includes a piece about having demonstrated success in restoration in the previous biennium. And as you may know, the new iteration of the Sandy Watershed Council just recently formed. And so the organization didn't exist in the previous biennium. And so it's obviously difficult for us to have the success in that period. But what I wanted to pitch was that because I've been involved as a Multnomah County's jurisdictional rep for some time, since 2007 in the old iteration of the Sandy Watershed Council, we bring existing partnerships to the new work, including work in the Sandy Delta and also in the upper and middle Sandy. We have a grant application in partnership with the Freshwater Trust, for example. Right now, it's a NOAA grant. And so I'm quite sure that we'll be very successful in doing on-the-ground restoration work during the next biennium if we have the funding to hire a staff person to leverage the existing partnerships through like the Sandy River Basin Partnership that includes all the jurisdictional folks, including the federal and local folks doing management in the Sandy area. This also includes the Manhattan Community College and others. And so I wanted to make a pitch, so at least in this verbal portion here, to ask the review team to consider that we do have existing partnerships. We have a bright future ahead for on-the-ground restoration, and I'd like to provide written comments as soon as I'm back from vacation. I'm currently in Yellowstone right now, or we're just about to join Yellowstone. So when I return, I would like to submit some written comments to you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to do that. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. You can submit all written comments for our board meeting on using our online portal on our website. So thank you very much. Neil, you're up next.
Thank you. So with the North Clackamas Watersheds Council, as I think you know, we're one of several councils around the state that just are currently ineligible for capacity funding, and we've really supported the idea that those administrative rules should be looked at again. We're doing a lot of work on the ground, and I know that OWEB had some capacity issues in doing that, but I just wanted to give you one example. I have the pleasure of working with Roy, even when he's supposedly on vacation, on the R6 PPDQ working group. And last week, we did a tour of some 6 PPDQ infrastructure for Senator Merkley's staff that was in town from DC. And the that kind of partnership has led to Senator Merkley putting in for, trying to create a new grant program in the Transportation Authorization Act that would address 6 PPDQ at the federal level. And that partnership is the kind of thing that can lead to big rewards, but takes a lot of investment and upfront staff time that isn't funded by project grants. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we struggle to participate in, even though we know it's critical and we know it has enormous potential to lead to future projects, not just in our watersheds, but really statewide. So that's really kind of my pitch that I know you've heard before, that really taking a look at those administrative rules and eligibility for the councils that have kind of fallen through the cracks is really important. And thank you very much.
Thank you both for being here and providing that comment. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I'm going to introduce myself because I think I forgot to do that. So Lindsay McClary, public at-large voting member on the board and co-chair along Woody Wolf here with the Partnerships and Capacity Committee. So next on the agenda, we've got the review of the OWEB Operating Capacity Grant with staff recommendations. So I'll turn that over to Courtney and Brian, and then I'd be happy to pass the agenda off to my co-chair after that.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And I do see that we had an additional person join. Is it okay if I have them introduce themselves and see if they had any public comment, Lindsay?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I missed that.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Lindsay. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Courtney. And sorry, Lindsay, for throwing you out of order. I'm Alexis. I'm with the Tryon Creek Watershed Council in the Southwest Portland metro area. And I was tuning in on YouTube as I got all of my links in order. But I also work with Roy and with Neil on that 6PPD working group. And I'm also one of those councils that doesn't receive capacity funds. So also interested in tracking those staff recommendations. Thanks for having us join.
Thank you so much. Well, I am going to share my screen, and then Brian and I are going to walk through a few short slides today. And I want to reiterate that the purpose of today's presentation is to give a preview to this committee and ask what questions you have and what we can do to prepare for the board funding discussion at the July board meeting and the board funding decision. So just confirming, Eric, I can see your face. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk through the decision pathway we get to the staff funding recommendations for council capacity grants. Then I'm going to turn it over to Brian, who's going to walk you through the results of the secondary review process, which references the draft evaluations that we posted online and provided to the board ahead of the meeting today. Then we'll just turn it open for general discussion from the board members to see what information we can provide to you when we present to the full board in July for the funding decision. So this slide is just a great reminder to everybody that the council capacity applications fund watershed councils to complete activities that are necessary for the actions in the blue box, which is the language that comes directly from the Constitution and Measure 76 and is in statute. So council capacity applications are funding councils to work on technical assistance, engagement, outreach, and preparation for on-the-ground work that supports native fish and wildlife species and habitat. The decision pathway for watershed councils is a little different than some of our other programs, say open solicitation. So I'm going to spend a minute walking you through each of the boxes on the slide. And if any of the board members have questions, please raise your hand before we move on to the funding recommendations, which Brian will walk us through. So council capacity grants have both board adopted rules and board adopted guidance. The application review process begins when the applications are submitted and there's an eligibility review, which is very detailed and laid out in rule and includes the size and the pre-existing eligibility criteria, which Neil was referencing earlier when he was giving public comment. The merit review is both in rule and in board adopted guidance. In rule, it says what the merit criteria should focus on, and the board adopted guidance provides the specific merit review process and merit review criteria. The guidance is posted on the website and brought to the board for updates as changes are made and as staff determine is necessary. We didn't bring the board adopted guidance to the board ahead of the 23-25 or 25-27 council capacity grant cycles because we made no changes except for application deadlines and contact information. So the last time the board reviewed the full board adopted guidance was in October of 2020. The secondary review process, which is in the green box on the screen, is what is in detailed in the board adopted guidance and includes an interview with the council staff, council board officers, and a technical review panel. Staff then take the results of that secondary review, which includes a recommendation from that technical review panel, and develop the staff funding recommendation, which again is based on board adopted guidance that we bring to the board for the funding decision. The guidance lays out, and this is one of the things I want to help the board understand today. The guidance lays out that councils that meet all of the merit criteria are recommended for full funding, and councils that don't meet all of the merit criteria are recommended for reduced funding. That part of the funding recommendation process is not based in rule. And so where I want the board committee to understand and see if you have questions about today is where, unlike say open solicitation, where everything is laid out in rule, since some of this is board adopted guidance, I want the board members to understand where your decision space is and that it doesn't go against the rule to recommend someone for full funding or to recommend them for reduced funding based on the information that staff provide. That is definitely within the board's decision-making purview. So before I pass it to Brian to talk about the results of the secondary review process and the staff funding recommendation, are there any questions from board members? I'm seeing no from Lindsay. So Brian, I will hand it off to you.
Sure. What we're looking at here are the councils that participated in the secondary review process, which means that staff and at least one board member, but typically several board members from each of the watershed councils participated in an interview with OWEB staff and our secondary review panel. And the results of that interview determined whether the council met criteria or made some progress on criteria or did not meet the criteria. And that shows up as red, meaning they did not meet criteria, yellow demonstrated some progress, and green, the council met the merit criteria. So you can see out of the 5 councils, 3 are recommended for full funding, 1 for reduced funding, and then 1 is a do not fund recommendation. And any questions on that while the slide is up?
And I would just add again that the draft evaluations for all 5 of these councils were posted online and provided to the watershed councils ahead of this meeting today and to the board committee. So what we're interested in hearing from the board committee today is, do you have any questions for staff on the review process, the staff funding recommendation, or what additional information do you need at the full board meeting to make a funding decision? I'm going to take it off share now so we can see everybody, and we'll go from there.
Thank you for that great presentation. Any questions from OWEB board members here? Liz.
I'm still formulating my idea, but I was going back to the colored blocks on that. And so in my mind, I'm just kind of thinking, if I was in the reduced funding piece, what is it that, as a board member, what would I want to ask that piece to move it, in thinking that we want everyone to get to some success? And I'm trying to think if I had enough information in just that block that would give me that. And so I'm just kind of thinking out loud as a board member, some of the questions that I would have. And I actually don't have anything now, but as you would guess, I'm like, okay, how do we help people be successful? With that. So I guess it's more of a comment than a question, Lindsay.
Yeah, Thank you, Liz. And I appreciate your wheels turning because I can envision us in July and there will be lots of questions from board members on this. And I've seen this come up in capacity grants probably 2 years ago or so. I think something that would be helpful for me is the reduced funding or the do not fund, a quick snapshot of their history. Have they been, you know, when in their past have they received sort of these other marks, and just a little snapshot of like where they've been. That would be helpful to kind of track their progress, and certainly would help me understand where they are in their progress.
Great. And so maybe, Lindsay, that did trigger me on a question that might be useful, is like, where did they, from their past comments, if they fell into the reduced or not funding, what progress have they been able to make to start to move that needle? I think that would be helpful for me in July.
Thanks, Liz. That's helpful.
Another one that comes up for me on that is, and I think, Courtney, in your previous presentations, you've hit on this, but isn't there maybe like a mid-biennium check-in where they can kind of circle back, and I don't know if it's reapply, but have a check-in and become eligible? So if you can speak to that at the board meeting, that would be helpful.
Yes, thanks, Lindsay. And I will say that actually has typically come out as a board recommendation at the end of conversation, and we can definitely lay that out as a scenario option for the board to consider.
Thank you. Woody?
Yeah, I was just wondering, as being relatively new to this, and with the funding climate where it is, what about the current application process does staff feel like is really helping these folks be competitive? And what do they think we need to work on? Is there improvement to be made in the process as the likelihood of these grants becoming more competitive occurs? This is really like my only second committee meeting, so I'm just curious.
Thanks, Woody. I think as Neil touched on, I think there are some opportunities for updates to the council capacity rules. And I think it's probably worthwhile, maybe, Sarah, if we give just a really brief update on the brief overview of the council capacity rules and where we are in those discussions for updating the rules as part of our presentation in July.
Thank you.
Yeah, I support that. And another thought that has come to me, and maybe I missed this in the presentation, but there's sort of like the initial review and then the secondary review. Do all councils get both, or is there a subset? How did we get to just some of them getting the secondary review?
I will touch on that and answer that question right now and make sure that we're really clear in July. So all councils go through the initial review, and this is and it's just staff at that point. The way the rules and the guidance are built is, you know, we have long-term relationships with watershed councils, both through council capacity grants and through all of our other grant programs. So the initial review is just done with staff to determine if they meet all of the merit criteria, or if we have questions or concerns, or any new watershed councils applying or councils that weren't previously funded. Then go to the secondary review process. So it's just a subset, and the way the process was built at the recommendation of the RAC way back when is, these are really important grants. They're only offered once a biennium. Instead of just making a decision based on the application, give the councils a chance to explain their challenges to you, to see if you can get your questions answered, to see if you can get them to full funding. And a great example of that was the Middle Deschutes Watershed Council, where we just had some questions about their approach to engagement and, you know, governance of the council. We had an awesome conversation with that board. They were able to answer all of our questions, and we determined that they met all of the merit criteria based on that discussion.
That, I think, thank you for that. And I think that would be helpful for the board to know as we sort of like take the information, you know, broad and then bring it down to like the 4 or 5 that we just saw on the graph. Jamie.
Thank you. I understand the criteria that was established in rules about have to be in good standing. Is it possible to interpret that as good standing if you were engaged in the last round? So to essentially address that question others have raised, if we weren't involved, how could we be involved? So is it possible to have that read of the rules that are in place now? Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Jamie, and we'll definitely make sure we touch on that with the full board. So the merit criteria that resulted in Sandy River Watershed Council getting a recommendation for reduced funding are in the board adopted guidance, not in the rule. And so it is in board adopted guidance that if you don't demonstrate you've met all the merit criteria or demonstrate significant progress on meeting all of the merit criteria, then staff recommendation is reduced funding. There is definitely space within the board's decision-making power to recommend the council for full funding, because that again is in board adopted guidance and not in rule. Other questions? This is a great conversation and exactly what Brian and I wanted so we can prepare for July. Yeah, Brian?
No, I just wanted to mention, I don't think we talked about it, but there were actually 56 watershed councils that did apply. And so all 56 went through that initial review process.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that would be good information. And I know that at a full board meeting, agenda and topic times are limited. And so I'm wondering if there might be time for like a 1-minute snapshot of a case study of someone, a watershed council who has been in the Do Not Fund and where they went from there.
Yeah.
Because I do know that board members, we have the luxury of voting on grant funds to go out to folks, and it's always feels good, but we do get stuck in this area where sometimes there isn't enough funding to go around, or there was a decision to do not fund, and that seems to gain a lot of attention. So if we could just show that there is a pathway from do not fund to getting back on track, I think that may help folks feel better.
Great, definitely. Thanks for that suggestion. All right, I think I need to pass the rest of the time to the Eric show. But thank you again, board members. This was really helpful, and we look forward to the full conversation with you in July.
Thank you, and I'm going to pass it over to Woody. I think that the Erics are up next, but I'm going to sign off on that.
Okay, well, we will pass it over to Eric Hartstein and Eric Williams and Jillian and Denise for agenda item number 4.
Great. Thank you, Woody. I will kick things off and share my screen really quick here. Okay. So we're here to talk about OWEB's Focused Investment Partnership, or FIP, and the Ecological Priorities Review that we've been conducting over the past 4, 5, 6 months. I'll kick things off, provide a little bit of background on the FIP program, and I'll then pass it over to Denise, who will get into some of the details on the engagement efforts that staff have conducted around the Ecological Priorities Review, before then turning it over to Eric, who's going to really get into some of the main themes that we've heard through the engagement efforts since winter and through the spring that we've been involved with. And the idea here is that we'll hopefully get some good direction from the committee as we begin to revise these ecological priorities into the summer. So we do have a summary staff report that was sent out to the committee. It's available on OWEB's website. Includes as attachments a letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service pertaining to the ecological priorities, a memo that was provided to us by the OSU Extension Service, as well as a written attachment that includes the summary themes that we're going to be talking about here in a little bit as well. So background on the FIP program and kind of working from the bottom of the slide up. So FIPs are implemented by high-performing partnerships across the state of Oregon, and each of them are required to have a strategic action plan, which is really quite robust and uses integrated and results-oriented approaches that guides their work over the course of 6 or really, if we're being honest, probably 8 or even 10 years as a part of the FIP partnership with OWEB. We're looking for these partnerships to achieve clear and measurable ecological outcomes of the work that they are conducting. And importantly here for our discussion today, they must be addressing a board identified priority of significance to the state. So the process to establish ecological priorities, this was first conducted a decade ago, back in 2015, when the OWEB board first adopted the FIP program and included a really extensive engagement process to develop the ecological priorities. And then in 2019, 2020, there was a pretty light review of those ecological priorities as the program was still really in its infancy. And the board didn't want to really dig too deeply into the priorities at that time. Some of the feedback that we did hear that was incorporated into the priorities were things like including tribal, strategic, and species recovery plans into the ecological priorities, as well as some fairly modest but important expansion of priority areas for native fish habitat. So the FIP program rules that the board adopted, some of the revisions in January, include this specific rule. It is around the board identified priorities for the FIP program, and it says that at least every 5 years, the board shall approve ecological priorities of significance to the state to be addressed by focused investment partnerships initiatives. The ecological priorities shall be determined with public input, scientific rigor, and this is important, shall include maps, a theory of change, and narrative describing the desired ecological outcomes for eligible focused investment partnership initiative activities. And here are the existing program ecological priorities that the board adopted back in 2015 with some revisions made in 2020. We've got the oak, woodland and prairie habitat, sagebrush, sage steppe habitat, coho habitat populations along the Oregon coast, Oregon closed lakes basin wetlands habitat, aquatic habitat for native fish species, dry type forest habitat, and coastal estuaries in Oregon. And this is what we have for the 4 funded FIP cohorts since 2015. I'm not going to read all of these, but one thing that is important to know is that we have funded FIP initiatives across all of the 7 ecological priorities. And this is just a spatial representation of the 4 cohorts of FIPS. If you're looking at the legend, you can see those cohorts by color at the bottom, and then the type of ecological priority they are representing. So I think what's really important here is just to show sort of the breadth and diversity of the FIP partnerships that have been funded to date, and how well they are spread across the state. And with that, I will pass it over to Denise.
Thanks, Eric. So as Eric described, we have been working for the past about 6 months to engage with partners around the state in getting their feedback on reviewing the current ecological priorities. So to do that, we developed an online survey. We held a tribal listening session, as well as 4 public listening sessions. We conducted one-on-one group discussions with some of our state and federal land management partners. And then we also incorporated email and written feedback into the staff memo that you've received today in preparation for this meeting. So the online survey and the one-on-one conversations and tribal listening session all utilized the same list of survey questions, so that we would be soliciting responses that we could collate and bring forward to the committee and to the full board. So these questions are here on the screen, and I'll read through these quickly. So the first question: after reviewing the existing OWEB board FIP ecological priorities, select all you would recommend to the OWEB board to keep. Second, are there any ecological priorities you would retire? If yes, list and briefly describe. Are there any ecological priorities you would combine? If yes, list and briefly describe. And 4, are there any ecological priorities that you would revise? If yes, list and briefly describe. And Eric Williams will be getting into the responses that we received to these questions. So can go to the next slide. 5, are there any new ecological priorities that you propose to be added? And if anyone answered yes to that, then they would receive this pop-up with additional questions to help us understand the readiness of that ecological priority to become a FIP priority. Question 6, is there anything else that you would want OWEB staff and the board to know as we review and potentially revise the existing OWEB FIP ecological priorities? And then 7, select what best represents your role in participating with this survey. And we gave folks the opportunity to say whether they were representing a tribe, a state, local, state, federal agency, a nonprofit, or just a member of the public. And then we also had an option for prefer not to say. So just some general feedback. This is like the really, really high level feedback, and then we'll be diving into specific feedback on those on our current ecological priorities. But really high level, the consensus across the board from all of those different avenues of outreach that we conducted was that the existing ecological priorities have value and should either be maintained in their current form or potentially some reimagining and merging of some of the existing priorities. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. Most of our respondents didn't find any existing priorities as candidates for retirement yet. That potentially there could be in the future, but there weren't any that had a strong consensus that they should be retired at this time. There were a few comments advocating for retiring of one or more priorities, but more was about focusing potentially on narrowing a geographic focus. There were some comments that noted it would be beneficial for us to gain some understanding on the conservation restoration progress that's occurred, particularly in sagebrush sagebrush, sage steppe habitat. That's a tongue twister. Sally and her seashells have nothing on the sagebrush, sage steppe, before further investments are made in that ecological priority. So just more understanding of what's been achieved and what remains to be achieved before future investments would be made there. We received some feedback that it would be important to think about habitat connectivity across all of our different ecological priorities and the importance of connectivity. There's been some significant work that's gone into developing a tool for that that ODFW has put together, and wanting to see us utilize some of that research and that work. We received some feedback on climate change, and we think we're in a good position to address that feedback. Feedback about expanding the ecological priority to encompass more coastal habitats, and then also to focus on areas experiencing extreme water stress. And now I will turn it over to Eric Williams, where we'll start diving into the specifics around our 7 ecological priorities.
All right, thanks, Denise. First, a word about our timeline here. We have several steps to go through leading up to what we're anticipating as board adoption of revised ecological priorities in January. That seemed like a long time away when we started this. However, it's only 7 months from now. And so we have a lot of work to do to get there. What we plan to do after this meeting is the feedback that you give today will appear in the committee report to the board for the July meeting. And then prior to the October meeting, when this committee meets in September, we'll give you an update of where we are, and we'll have an agenda item at the October board meeting to get more in depth with full board discussion. And hopefully that would lead up to board adoption of revised priorities in January. Our plan is then to release the next solicitation for FIP initiatives following that board adoption of ecological priorities, so that the next cohort would be applying to these newly revised priorities. So what we'd like to do here is, since, as Denise mentioned, there was no consensus around removing priorities, many suggestions about tweaking them or combining them, we want to walk through priority by priority with each of these 7 and talk about the themes that emerged from the feedback that we had through the avenues that Denise mentioned. And I do want to give a special thanks to the OSU Extension Fire Program, whose pretty extensive letter was included in your packet with some really helpful information, really detailed information that's going to help inform this process. And we also have a letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service there, and we appreciate their input, as well as ODFW. We don't have a letter from them, but we have had extensive discussions with them that we will continue, particularly around the priorities for aquatic species. So let's walk through these one by one, and we'll pause at each one to get your feedback. First is Oak, Woodland, and Prairie. That's the current priority name. And what you see there is the map showing areas that are eligible for FIPS to work within this priority. Let's look at the next slide. We've divided the feedback into our assessment of what would be relatively simple changes to make to the priority, moderate changes, and complex being a larger level of work to adjust the priority. And so you can see here for oak, woodland, and prairie habitat, we've received some themes around dropping woodland from the title and just simply calling it oak and prairie habitat, emphasizing that wet prairie is an eligible focus within this priority, and including assisted migration as one of the techniques to address limiting factors within the priority. Those are all in the simple column. In the moderate workload column, we have expanding upon the importance of both prescribed and cultural burning and foods, and including that in the priority memo, that capacity for implementing prescribed and cultural burning is as a higher priority limiting factor than community acceptance, perhaps isn't quite accurate. This feedback you'll see in the memo from OSU that the capacity to implement widespread prescribed and cultural burning is actually a larger limiting factor than community acceptance. We have no suggestions that would be more complex for this priority. So I'll pause there and see if committee members have questions or feedback on this summary of the themes from our engagement. All right, seeing none, let's move to the next priority. Sagebrush, sage steppe habitat. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Almost got it. So this also shows the mapped extent of where FIP partnerships can apply for FIP initiatives within this priority. And next slide will show us the themes from our engagement. We have one under the moderate category here, updating the priority with new data related to both existing core habitat and high quality vegetation that may not currently host sage grouse populations, but could provide habitat for other species within the priority. So that was the extent of the themes from our engagement on this priority. I'll pause here again to see if committee members have any questions or feedback on the sagebrush, sage steppe priority. All right, the next up is coho habitat and populations along the Oregon coast. You can see the map here showing where partnerships are eligible to apply for this FIP. And the next slide will show us the feedback we have, and it's really just one under the moderately challenging category, which was to combine ecological priorities, particularly combining this priority coho habitat with aquatic habitat for native fish species and or coastal estuaries. I think in staff looking at this suggestion, it seems to match best with aquatic habitat for native fish species, given that the coastal estuaries priority really focuses on tidal wetland habitat, which certainly is related to coho, but distinctly different from some of the limiting factors for coho populations. So we had pretty broad consensus around including the coho habitat priority in with the aquatic habitat for native fish species priority. So I'll stop there to see if committee members have questions or feedback.
Eric, this is Liz.
Yes, go ahead.
I just, because I've not been on all that long, can you remind me or go back to why coho was taken out? Was there an additional threat there or a critical habitat there, and then moving it into a wider description, would that impact that? I just don't know why it was originally.
Yeah, that's a great question, Liz. And that initially was separated out on the recommendation of ODFW at the time. And as Eric mentioned, this was going back a decade. They wanted to address coho as a distinct population because of the significant possibility to delist the species, and having really specific information on those watersheds and the limiting factors that could potentially lead to that delisting. In speaking with ODFW in this go around, they feel that that is no longer necessary given the progress made, and that keeping this as a distinct priority doesn't necessarily help or degrade that effort to potentially delist coho. I'll see if Eric and Denise have anything else to add to that. All right.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions or feedback on this one? All right, let's go to the next priority, which is the Oregon Closed Lake Space and Wetlands Habitat. You can see the map here, and of course we've had 2 rounds of FIP in the Harney Basin wetlands under this priority. Let's look at the next slide. We have no suggestions or themes emerging from our engagement, so seems pretty straightforward that we can keep that one as it is. Any questions or comments about that? Okay. All right. This one is perhaps the one with the most comments and feedback, aquatic habitat for native fish species. On this map, partnerships are eligible to apply for this FIP in the green and yellow watersheds, which are the high and medium priorities. This map was primarily developed by ODFW 10 years ago when we created the priority. And let's look at the next slide for our suggestions. We have a simple suggestion here, which is to highlight the importance of cold water refugia and riparian habitats, which we can do. A moderately challenging suggestion or theme to combine, as we've mentioned, this priority with coho and perhaps estuaries, and then getting to the complex. And we had quite a few comments about this, and it is to broaden this priority to include other native aquatic species, non-fish species, particularly Oregon spotted frog, but also other species that were noted, including western pond turtle and freshwater mussels. And then another suggestion to reprioritize some of those watersheds as high priority in that map that you just saw. And ODFW certainly can work with us on that, and they have a lot of information that could help us improve the quality of that map in some parts of the state. Both of those suggestions in the complex column will take a little bit more effort than some of the more moderate or simple suggestions. And another note around broadening the aquatic habitat for native fish species priority, some commenters suggested even including any species of significant concern that are aquatic species statewide. And we have limited this to particular species on this slide because of what Eric Hartstein noted in the intro, that our rules require that priorities include maps. And so having a statewide priority kind of works against that rule and against the concept of the board designating priorities for the FIP program. So let me stop, and before I go to the committee, I wanted to see if Eric or Denise wanted to add any additional background on this one.
I think you got it, Eric.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Let's go to Denise. Did you have a comment?
Lindsay's hand is up.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, that's okay, Denise.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right,
Go ahead,
thank
Lindsay.
you. Yeah, thanks. I attended some of the listening sessions and heard the first comment here under the complex bucket, and also thought I might have provided some comment on that as well. So yeah, I'm curious to know on some of these complex revisions, are staff looking at kind of black and white, yes or no, we can implement or we can't, or like kind of maybe a tiered approach of, well, we can do a combination or hit some level of this comment? Can you just speak a little bit to like, there's a lot of comments. What is going to happen with that as you kind of work through this process?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I think there is certainly room here for more than a yes/no approach. And given some of our preliminary conversations, particularly with ODFW, we think that there probably are adequate maps or mapping existing for some non-fish aquatic species like spotted frog, western pond turtle, that could lend itself to a priority. Other non-fish aquatic species, I think, are perhaps a little bit more challenging in terms of the lack of maps showing locations for priority areas for habitat. And certainly the mussel species, I think, fall into that category. And so based on the feedback we hear from you today, we would have a direction to explore further. And we were hoping to get your feedback to help us guide the next level of inquiry so that we can begin to provide a bit more detail. And it would be our plan to come back to the committee in 3 months with a status update of what we found in terms of particular data mapping that might be available to hopefully provide a clearer direction of where the edits to the priority might be going. And then we could have a full board discussion on that in October, as I said earlier, leading up to January adoption of the new priorities.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
And so, Lindsay, I'm hearing from your question, maybe some direction to go ahead and pursue what mapping might be available for non-fish aquatic species to include in this priority.
Yeah, I didn't know if it would be appropriate to provide a comment now or wait till the end of the presentation, but with that prompt, oh, go ahead. I'll just go ahead and say I understand that broadening it to take out the word fish would kind of broaden it too large, and I really like what staff has put together here as sort of what I would consider like a compromise or a step in the right direction to open it up to maybe 1, 2, maybe 3, try not to overcomplicate it, but other high priority species that have been designated across the state. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Go ahead, Liz.
So I think I have more of a comment too, as I'm just wondering, in broadening it, what is the basis that we do that on? And I'm thinking about our last conversation about the coho, is that there was something very specific in their process about the potential to list it that moved it into its separate category. So just, I don't know if it's a concern, and maybe this is for July, is that if we broaden it too much, have we just blurred the line between what is a high priority and you know, a moderate priority? So that's just a comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I think staff are on the same page as you on that. I think that's why we don't want to follow some of the suggestions we heard, which were to broaden it to include all aquatic species, no matter where they are in the state. And we're again pointing back to the administrative rule that says that priorities have a map showing where the priority habitats are. And so with direction from this committee, we would pursue looking at species that have adequate mapping that could be considered to broaden this particular priority. So that we're not taking a full statewide approach and opening up the priority too broadly. So yes, we share your concern about that.
Right. Thank you.
And if Eric, if I could just maybe add on a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
To that, I think it's a good comparison with the coho, as the Oregon spotted frog is a ESA listed species, and as Eric said, we do have pretty good maps available to incorporate into a broader aquatic habitat priority. And I think Western pond turtle is a candidate species, and you know, with hopefully similar levels of mapping that we could incorporate. So there's I think the link there is either being a candidate or an actual listed species.
I'll just add that there was some discussion in our listening sessions about, or maybe it was now I might be getting the wrong group that provided the feedback, but looking at species that are on the precipice of becoming listed could be something important for the board to consider, not waiting until something is completely imperiled before we're investing in improving the habitat needs for those species. So.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. And we heard from ODFW that there is a fairly lengthy list of species of greatest conservation need that they're working on in their update to the statewide State Wildlife Action Plan. And so that's where some of this information we've been referencing exists, and we'll be working with them between now and the next time we talk with you with further detail on what kind of information and mapping is available in those species. Okay, anything else on aquatic habitat? All right, I think we have 2 more to go. So let's go to the next slide. This is our dry type forest habitat. This is the map included in the current priority. And the next slide will show us themes from our engagement. And you can see we got quite a bit here, ranging from the simple, which is to incorporate post-disturbance recovery into the priority memos, and to also include assisted migration in dry type forest habitat. And this was a pretty clear preference from several partners at ODF and at OSU as well, that there's a recognition of how significant changing climate has been on the viability of certain species in their historically mapped locations. And so our partners feel pretty strongly that if we're going to succeed in this effort, that this should be included, at least in the priority memo. And so going to the moderate category, expand upon the importance of both prescribed and cultural burning. We've talked about both of these, and including as a limiting factor, the capacity for implementing prescribed and cultural burning. And then moving to the complex, we have updating the priority map to reflect more current analysis and revisions to the key limiting factors, and a suggestion or theme to broaden the habitat to include other forest habitat types as well. And I want to turn to Eric and or Denise to see if you want to elaborate any on those complex themes.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. With the top one, the updating the map to reflect the more current analysis, we have received an updated map. I think the one that we have right now is actually from 2015, and things have changed over the past decade. And if I maybe go back, there's a lot more red now that's reflected in the updated map. So just to maybe give the committee and the board members a heads up that if we go in that direction, that the map will look a little less green here and more red in the areas that you might suspect would be more red down in Southwest Oregon, and then in Central Oregon, where we've had a pretty significant amount of wildfire and a high degree of forest in need of restoration, as what this map intends to convey.
All right, so questions, comments, feedback on this one?
Eric,
Go ahead, Liz.
That map was really striking to me, and I just note too that it would be even more significant if we would have put in the West Side. I know we're talking about a dry type forest, the West Side 2020 fires, and just a comment. I think this seems to be a right path to look at, because we're keeping up with the idea of disturbance in the way that it's adapting, landscapes across Oregon. So just kudos for just even taking it on.
Thanks, Liz. Other questions or comments? All right, let's move to our next priority, which is coastal estuaries in Oregon. You can see the map locations, obviously a relatively small geographic spread for this one. Let's go to our themes from engagement. We have one that we've talked about before. This one was mentioned quite a few times in the survey and in our other feedback avenues as a candidate for potentially merging with one of the other categories. And I think, as we talked earlier, it seems like a more clear merging to merge coho with aquatic habitat. This one does feel a little bit different, particularly with the experience we're seeing right now in the current, the one current estuaries FIP that we have, and they're really focused on looking at the tidal wetlands landward migration maps that have been prepared for the coast, and really focusing on trying to facilitate that movement of tidal wetlands inland due to sea level rise. That does feel quite a bit different than some of the work that's being done under the coho and aquatic species priorities. So with that as background, I'll open this one up to any questions or comments from the committee. All right. Is the committee feeling comfortable with the approach of looking at combining coho and aquatic and leaving coastal estuaries as a separate priority? Go ahead, Liz.
I do. I mean, I think just the recommendation from other agencies holds with me.
I'll chime in. I agree with that as well. It seems like the coho and native aquatic and fish habitat is a little bit more aligned, and this one is its own unique habitat type.
All right. Well, that was the last of our 7 priorities. So Eric, if you wouldn't mind, let's stop the screen share and see each other again. And just to reiterate, what we'll do from here is include your feedback from this conversation in the committee report to the full board for next month's board meeting. That way, if any other board members want to, discuss or have a question on anything, we would have the space to do that in the committee report section of the board agenda, and then come back to you again in September to give you an update on where we are with revised priorities leading up to an agenda item at the October full board meeting, and then hopefully adoption of revised priorities in January. Any questions about that process or timeline? Lindsay, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question and a comment. So my first question is, are the other 2 committees getting this presentation, or just us because we're the partnerships committee?
Just you.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I thought so, but just wanted to ask. So, and then my comment is just like, absolutely fantastic and fabulous job, OWEB staff. Like, this is a really big lift, and like the amount of time that this process is taking, and all of the engagement and the due diligence, and then synthesizing all of the comments into like a digestible format that is understandable, like just really top notch. I'm really impressed, and thanks for a great presentation.
Thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate that. And back on the board meeting, we did ask Nicole to include a little bit more time than we normally do for committee reports in case there are reactions or questions from other board members on where we are today. Go ahead, Liz. I saw your hand up.
Oh, no, I just wanted to echo what Lindsay said. I think just this hour or so of digging a little deeper before the meeting is important because our landscapes are changing so quickly. And the fact that y'all focused on just making sure we're updated, re-looking at all the information, taking a look at, these, what could be catastrophic events across the landscape. It's just, I really appreciate this time and the preparation to do it. It's very worthwhile.
I appreciate you guys flagging this kind of at a balcony level too, Lindsay and Liz, because this is exactly what we were hoping with these more program-oriented board committees, is that you guys are now kind of ambassadors back to the board as the full board sort of struggles with a limited timeline and limited bandwidth to be able to sort their way through some of these questions. And so our hope is that this gives you the background to be able to really actively participate alongside staff presentation. So it's not just, you know, staff bringing a decision to the board. It kind of goes around the pike, and then the board makes a decision. But to have you guys engaging in a robust dialogue with your colleagues, where you just have a greater level of exposure and expertise in this topic now, having kind of worked through this, and we look forward to being side by side with you in that conversation.
All right. Well, thank you. That concludes.
So don't forget anything between now and the end of July or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that very in-depth presentation. I found it very useful. A lot of good information in there. Unless I'm missing somebody's hand up, we'll move on.
Denise has a hand up.
Oh, Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Since we had just a little bit more time, I know we're not supposed to put stuff in the chat, but I don't know if everybody knows. We talked about in the beginning the maps, the priority memos, and the theory of change for these priorities. And I don't know if everybody knows where to find those on our website. So for folks who are listening on YouTube, if you go to our homepage, on the top, there's a bar that says grant programs. If you click that, you'll get a pull down menu. And if you scroll down to focused investment partnerships, the page opens with all the information about the FIP grant program. And in the middle of the page, there's a header that says ecological priorities. And then when you scroll down in that, each of the 7 OWEB ecological priorities are there. And when you click on those, you get to view the priority memo, theory of change, and web map for each of these. So these are the things that we've been referencing, and these are the things that we would be updating based on the feedback that we incorporate from you all on the full board. And we'll be reaching out, continuing to reach out to our agency partners to get their assistance in doing that work. But these are the things that'll be, you know, merging across some of those priorities and being updated across others. So I just wanted folks to know how to find that, what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? Well, it looks like we're quite a bit ahead of schedule, so we will wrap it up. And future topics. Do the committee members have anything additional for the good of the order that would be that the committee would like to address for future meetings?
Hey,
Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks, Woody. It's Lindsay. I don't have anything to add. I just want to say I really like this new committee structure and format, and feel that like we did get to do the deep dive, and we'll come to the July board meeting feeling I feel very prepared on the 2 topics that we covered today, and just I'm feeling very good about this new reorg. So thanks for that.
And for the September meeting, we mentioned we would come back on the FIP priorities topic. I think Courtney has a topic as well for September.
Yes, thanks for that reminder, Eric. The CREP technical assistance grants have for a long time been delegated awards, but last biennium, for the first time, we had to draw a funding line. We received more applications than funding was available, and executive team discussed this, and we decided that we're going to shift them to board awards because it feels really uncomfortable to make draw a funding line without the opportunity for public comment and board decision making. So we'll be previewing those awards with the committee in September for a board award in October.
I want to share too, just kind of as a on the horizon thing, that Neil and Alexis both mentioned, it looks like they probably shifted back to YouTube status, but that we had planned to undertake capacity grant rulemaking this year and kind of made a commitment both to the board and the community that we need to make sure that we were ready to staff that appropriately. But with our 25-27 budget starting to come into focus, I want to both kind of reassure our partners that that's a active conversation in our executive team, is when and how can we staff that and make sure that we don't let that drift off the radar, because we know it's ripe to overripe. And so Courtney mentioned we'll bring that back with kind of a recommendation on timing and an update to the July board meeting. But when we do that, this committee will get very busy all of a sudden and sort of helping us with the sort of initial scoping and framing discussions before and outreach before rulemaking begins in its kind of formal sense. So don't get the impression that because we ended early today that this this committee will be light on content for the foreseeable future. We do try to schedule you enough space that we don't have to rush if we get into a robust discussion. So I think it's not unusual for us to end before time, but there is a wave right on the horizon, just so you know. It's coming. So this will be a busy committee for some time to come. And I think that's all we have from staff in terms of upcoming committee priorities. So if members aren't adding anything additional, feel free to send us notes offline if you have emerging issues or other topics that you want to make sure that we keep in mind for future meetings.
Okay, well, before we adjourn, does anybody have anything they feel is relevant for today's committee meeting? Seeing none, I look forward to seeing you in July.
Thanks so much, everybody. We'll
everybody.
see you in Pendleton.
Have a
Okay,
great
everyone.
summer.
Bye, everyone.